This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 7, Episode 22. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network of shows brought to you by Silencer Shop. Today is Thursday, December 29th, 2022, as of the recording of this episode. And I am your humble host, Riley Bowman. And today, I always chuckle whenever I say humble host. It just makes me laugh, Matthew. But hey, Matthew's our other humble host.
What's up, man?
Glad to be with you on this week between two holidays, Christmas on the one end and New Year's on the other end. So here we are for the final podcast episode of the year of 2022.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. And in fact, I think this will be the last one for what we consider to be season 7. So I think we might as well just flip that switch on January 1 and roll into we've got done 22 episodes in season 7 here. So I think we might as well. It's a good opportunity. Let's flip the switch, turn the page, welcome everybody in a new year in season 8 of the podcast, which of course means not a whole lot. It's just as a way of breaking things up, because otherwise we'd be saying right now welcome to this is a Concealed Carry Podcast episode 723 or something.
Yeah, I think around around 200 or 300 episodes we said we got to do something here.
Although I guess what is it? It's Joe Rogan. I think that still numbers every episode, and he's up to what I don't know, 1,400 or something.
Well, he could probably do whatever he wants on that show, and people would still listen to it.
Well, welcome everybody to this podcast. This will be a special one, as it is at the end of the year, as we look forward to a new year, the year 2023. I think I think there's a lot of really cool things we can discuss. I mean, we kind of do a little bit of a look back over 2022. And then as we look at things to come in 2023, and in fact, today's episode is titled Your 2023 Training Plan. So we're going to take the approach here today of looking forward to this next year and hopefully giving you some tips, tricks, suggestions, ideas, advice, whatever you want to call it, as it relates to having a successful and productive year of 2023 in whatever shape or form that may be for you, all of you individually out there listening or watching the show. And by that, we're going to talk about some goals today. Goal setting. I'm going to share with you some things that I wanted to work on and achieve here in 2022. And also what 2023 looks for me. And this could be in a variety of contexts, whatever it is. If you wanted to have the goal of, I want to make sure that I spend 15 minutes each day reading the Bible. Great. That's an awesome goal. Or maybe it's, you want to, volunteer, you want to do a minimum of, 10 hours a week or something, serving in some kind of volunteer capacity in your community. Awesome. Another great goal. Or if you want to be way more specific as far as I want to achieve a sub 1.2 second draw or something, in 2023. Or why not just go, for the whole tamale and go for a sub-second. Anyway, that's the idea. We're going to talk about those kinds of things today, but we're going to approach from our perspective of your 2023 training plan. We're going to give you a bunch of strategies and ideas, dry fire, etc. Hopefully set you up for success in the coming year. But first, today's episode is sponsored by Silencer Shop. SilencerShop.com is the place to go. We're so honored that they are our title sponsor of the Concealed Carry podcast here and our network of podcast shows. In fact, I mentioned pretty often when we talk about Silencer Shop and some of the different promotions they have. Just in the last week alone, I've gotten multiple emails advertising different models of suppressors and how several of these had the option of getting a quote-unquote free tax stamp as part of your purchase, meaning that, one of the things people sometimes say holds them back from following through on the purchase of a suppressor is, wow, there's the cost of the suppressor, and then there's the $200 I got to pay the government, and I got to go through all this paperwork. And so on and so forth. Well, don't let that hold you back, because again, I've seen no less than 5, I think, different models the last week with free tax stamps available just by purchasing those models. In fact, some of those I think expire on New Year's Eve night. Some of them are active right now. I know one of those I saw was the Q Trash Panda suppressor. I can't remember what some of the others were now off the top of my head, but that was one that stood out to me. I'm looking right now on Silencer Shop's website at the YHM Turbo K suppressor, a short, lightweight suppressor and chambered in 5.56. You buy one of these right now, you're going to get a $100 Silencer Shop gift card if you buy before December 31st. So I know for some of you that are catching the audio-only version of the podcast, that this deal may be expired, but just know that there's new deals coming all the time from Silencer Shop. The Turbo K, Matthew, is only $425 on Silencer Shop's website. So you get a $100 gift card, and it basically it's effectively $325 for a suppressor, dude, in 5.56. It's full auto rated.
Wow,
that's awesome. Now I don't have the Turbo K. The most recent one I picked up is the Resonator K, which is the exact same suppressor but in 30 caliber. I wanted that because I wanted to be able to use it on my 300 Blackout as well as on my 5.56 AR pistols or rifles. And it's a great little setup. And I've got also another 5.56 from YHM. It's not the Turbo K. It's I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. It's a little bit longer one. Anyway, brain's not working perfectly because it's the holiday season. But can't wait to get that one out of jail either. It'll be a really exciting time. Lots of great deals from Silencer Shop. Thanks for being our title sponsor, guys. Take advantage of the deals. Definitely worth looking into. And just know that going through the application process, especially if you go to a Silencer Shop powered dealer, like the guy I use here locally, makes that process a total breeze. So simple. So silencershop.com. Thanks to them again for being our title sponsor. Our other episode sponsor today is mountainmanmedical.com. Mountain Man Medical. Here we go. Here's one of the kits. Our deal with Mountain Man Medical was because this is a sub brand of concealedcarry.com, was to bring affordable, reasonably priced trauma kits to the masses, but still have them be outfitted with all of the quality components that you would expect, right? So we didn't want to do anything cheap, especially as it relates to life-saving gear. Recently I saw somebody comment on, I think it was a Mountain Man Medical post, Matthew, and said something about the fact of, hey, you know what, you don't buy this stuff from these guys. Just go out there online and buy all this yourself. Put together your own kit. It'll be cheaper that way. And I was like, yeah, that's not quite true. And I know, because this has been a topic of discussion between me and Jacob and Brian McLaughlin, our director of training at Mountain Man Medical. And what I could tell you is that you cannot source all of those components that go into our kits individually and save money. That's how good the prices are at mountainmanmedical.com. So I as a test, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go. Like, I knew we had already been through this process, but I was like, I'm going to do this right here, right now. I sat down. I think it was the Wind River kit. I looked up at all the components for the Wind River kit on Amazon.com, because like some of those are listed below retail. So I didn't want to just do retail prices. What can I go and buy these individual components today? And the fact was, it was going to cost like $230 or something to buy all the individual components that go into the Wind River kit, not including the pouch that they go in for mountainmanmedical.com. And we sell that same Wind River kit for $199 with pouch. So anyway, point is, to those of you that would think, oh, I'll just assemble my own kit, I'll save money. We went into this to save you guys the money at mountainmanmedical.com. So I hope you'll support mountainmanmedical.com, which supports the podcast and makes what we do here possible. Anyway, enough about that, guys.
Can I add one thing about that? Just one danger about potentially sourcing your stuff. And I know this isn't the topic, but while we're on it, one danger is trying to source some of these products or components and buying knockoff stuff and not knowing it, or buying
Yeah.
sub quality stuff. And certainly this isn't a place, an aspect that you want to pull it out and, go to use it, and there's no adhesive on your chest seal because it's, from Zing Zang, China, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So,
Or you're buying expired or almost expired products.
right. So,
I promise
there's
you, we
some,
move through our stock here at MM Medical frequently enough that you're getting new stuff.
yeah. So I didn't want to, hijack the whole topic, but I just, when we're on the topic, I think it's important. You might be able to buy a component for cheaper, but it might be expired. It might not be, the same quality or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, buddy. Awesome. Good stuff. Hey, real quick, we do have a comment from somebody since we were talking about Silencer Shop. He says this is Albert on Facebook commenting, "Why a suppressor if you don't have the equipment for one?" Well, that's a fair question. I'd say, well, it takes minimum right now probably 8 to 9 months to process your E-Form 4 through the ATF. So it could be that you want to plan for the future, Albert. Why not buy a gun that could use a suppressor? Yeah, Albert says he only has a one semi-auto, which is his Thompson submachine gun. You know what would be awesome is having a Thompson that is suppressed. I would dig that in a big way. That would be awesome. Even if it's just a semi-automatic version of a Thompson, like that would be really cool to have a 45 ACP Thompson suppressed. Oh yeah, you're speaking my language, Albert. And he says everything else is revolvers and bolt actions and lever actions. Well, so here's the thing. Speaking of goals, one of my goals in 2023 is to actually get my hunting rifle, which is chambered in a 7mm Remington Magnum, is to get that thing threaded for a suppressor. And then I'll be able to use a 30 caliber suppressor on it because it's 7mm, which is a .284, so it's just under 30 caliber. So my plan is to get my hunting bolt action rifle threaded for a suppressor in 2023 so that I can use my hunting rifle suppressed. Why not? Or you asked the question why, and I say why not? Because I value my hearing protection. And what's even better than having hearing protection on your ears is having a gun that starts out quiet in the first place. And whether you use hearing protection with that or not. But a lot of folks, when they go hunting, I know this was always a challenge for me. I try to carry like plugs around my neck so that if I had the opportunity to throw plugs in my ears before firing a shot at a deer or an elk or something, I would do that. But there were certainly times in my hunting life where I didn't have that opportunity and thought, well, it's just one shot, But guess what? One shot from a high-powered rifle it doesn't take a lot to damage your hearing. So anyway, I want to get everything that I shoot on a regular basis, as far as rifles go, suppressed. And that's when I started investing in suppressors. So that's my why, Albert. You'll have to figure out your own why, but I think suppressing a Thompson is why enough. You probably would have to have that thing custom threaded or something, I would guess, but that would be awesome. Well, again, today's episode, we're talking about your 2023 training plan. So, our company here, and we're a small company of, I think, 11 of us in total that work at concealedcarry.com. Many of you are familiar with Jacob Paulson, our president. Then there's me, his sidekick, Matthew, another sidekick because you've been with us so long and you do so much for us for the company. We got Sam, we got David, we got Jeremy, we got Jason, we've got Mitch, we've got
Brian and Corey.
Brian and Corey. Did we get everybody? We got our team here. And one thing we do each year is at the start of, and this is going to happen like in the next couple of days here, probably our next daily meeting that we have with all of our staff next Tuesday, because I think everybody will have Monday off due to the holiday. But we will ask everybody to share what their 2023 goals are. And we'll also review, well, actually we did already, I think, kind of a review of what our 2022 goals were just a few days ago or a week or so ago. And I know some people don't get into the whole like making goals and stuff at the new year. uh, and whatnot. And that's totally fine and actually viable, because I think it's kind of silly as well if you use the new year as an excuse to make goals and you fail to make goals at other times throughout the year. I tend to, yeah, I've got goals, and I tend to, set goals and things as I need to, as I, find a reason to. I don't wait for the new year. But I think the new year is a good opportunity, Matthew, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Just, as we think about the ending of one year and the beginning of another, yeah, I guess you could say that December 31st and January 1st are, I mean, they're just two different days on the calendar, like whatever. But it isn't a good opportunity, I think, to look back and in a variety of ways, like, well, how did the last year go for me? Am I making my goals financially? Am I achieving my career goals? Am I, how am I doing my health? Whatever things are important to you in your life, I think it's good to just, why not take the opportunity to look back and see how you're doing, and then using that as a catalyst for turning your focus to the future.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, that's something we'll be doing as a company here in a few days, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of our goals. At least I'm going to share some stuff about me personally. I don't know about Matthew, um, but the whole point of today's episode, though, is to eventually get to a place, because I'm going to share with you some things that are specific to me and my training plan, and and then we're going to outline some things to help you formulate your own training plan for 2023. But what's your thought on kind of the general premise here, Matthew?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I've read this or maybe this is something that Jacob's very uh he values setting goals in these types of things. And maybe he said it or maybe it was something that he recommended I read. But I think that there is some value and actual some evidence that people who set goals maybe are more productive in certain areas or are able, when you do set goals, you're more likely to complete those things that you set, goals that you can reach and things like that, rather than kind of just, um, just saying, hey, I'd like to get better at, I'd like to get in shape. If you don't have things, that you can quantify, you're less likely to be, to achieve those things. I will, if you're listening, maybe you'll relate to me. I am very bad at setting goals. I'm horrible at it. It's something that I struggle with. One thing that I think I do good is I do reflect. I like to reflect, but that's always after the fact, and like you kind of were saying, I'll look back over a period of time or over, from one event, some substantial event, and then, I'll take a moment to kind of reflect and say, okay, since this, what has changed in my life and where am I compared to where I was, and kind of reflect. But I am terrible at setting goals. So this is good for me because, and it's good as a company that I have bosses that kind of, tell me to set these goals, because I do believe that there's value. Even for somebody like me who struggles with setting goals and kind of doing that. So I hope that this is beneficial for people who, are already there and they're a big goal setter, and those that like me that kind of struggle with the whole concept. But I do think that this will be beneficial.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I would say that I'm probably, just hearing you mention your thoughts there, that I'm probably somewhere between you and Jacob, and on the spectrum, if you will. I'm not the greatest at like diligently writing things down and mapping it out, and certainly in terms of, like, because I don't know, we just all have different personalities, right, and different ways we like to live our lives and operate and whatnot. Jacob's the type of person, I think, that would write something down very specifically, and then, like, okay, so to get there, I'm going to do this this week, and I'm going to do this and this and this on such and such days. Even like getting into he's more of a getting into the specifics, and the specific planning behind things in a lot of respects. I'm not quite to that extreme. In fact, far from it. But I do have goals, and I know what those are, and I'm working towards them. And they do keep me aligned in a lot of ways. Although I would say that there's times where I probably lose sight of what those things are from time to time. But let me just share with you one thing that was a goal of mine in 2022. And this was one that I specifically listed out in our meeting at the beginning of 2022 as a company, was that I wanted to uh, basically I wanted to shoot more local matches so that I have more opportunities to shoot classifiers so that I'd have the opportunity and hopefully would be able to move up in classification in USPSA. I wanted to make Grandmaster. And so my report on that now at the end of 2022 is that unfortunately I did not make Grandmaster in USPSA in 2022. I did, however, shoot more local matches in 2022 than I did in 2021. So I'm a very busy guy, and I don't get a ton of opportunities to shoot matches and compete like some of my cohorts, if you will, and friends and whatnot. Although I'd love to, but I'm a husband and I'm a father of five, trying to help do what I can to run our family of brands and companies here at concealedcarry.com, trying to do the podcast, trying to do trying to also be involved in my church and community. uh, I, I can't dedicate every weekend or even every other weekend to go and shoot matches, but I did want to try to average at least one match per month that would give me a classifier opportunity, and I was able to average about one match per month. So I was happy with that. That was better than, I think I shot like 7 local matches in all of 2021, and then I shot like 8 majors in 2021. This year I shot fewer majors, and I knew that going in. The schedule just didn't work out, and I wasn't going to have that as many opportunities to go to some of the big matches. And shooting big matches is really important to me. It ties very much to my goals as a shooter, because in me shooting at the some of the biggest matches in the country, uh, I'm there competing against the best and the top shooters in the game, and that becomes a metric of, hey, this is how I'm doing. And so that's also really important. But this year, I was able to make it to 2 national championships, 1 area championship, and 1 state championship. And I think that's all I was able to accomplish as far as majors. But I was good with that. And it's hard I don't like to set goals that are like, it's good to set specific goals. And in fact, that's one of that's like the first thing about a good goal that you should have, is that the goal should be specific, right? Because it'd be really easy for me just to say, well, in 2023, I'm going to work out more. Well, what does that mean exactly? Like, okay, I guess, all right, so if I work out 1% more than I did in 2022, then I guess I accomplished my goal, right? But it's not very specific, and probably somewhat hard to even measure. And so specific goals are really important, but there's also a danger to specific goals, especially when those specifics are outside of your control. So like, I can't, as a shooter, as much as I would love to say finish in the top 20, the top 10, the top 5, maybe even win a national championship, that's outside of my control, generally speaking. I mean, I can certainly strive towards that, but I might have a bad day. It's like, unfortunately, Max Michel, after dominating carry optics division in USPSA competition the last, well, he didn't win last year either, but for like a 5-year or 6-year in a row stretch, maybe it was 5 years in a row, I think Max won carry optics nationals every year, right? And last year was the first time he didn't. And I know this year he came back wanting to win it again, get back to where he was on the top. And he didn't either, right? And I know specifically that day one didn't go the way he wanted it to go. And that's just how it goes sometimes, you know? And so that kind of thing is out of your control. And just because you do your 100% doesn't mean that somebody else isn't going to just be able to do just a little bit more and edge you out. So I didn't want to tie my goals to something super specific, but I did say that I wanted to do better this year than I did last year. Now that's a weird thing because I just said how important it is to have specific goals, but I believe in only having it specific and to a point that it isn't so specific. It's something that I can't guarantee, if you will, like if, or it's just outside my control. So last year compared to this year at nationals, my percentage finish against the winner went up like almost 8%. That's awesome. So I put that down as goal accomplished. Did better this year than I did last year. And next year will be hopefully the same way too, right? But the specifics to get there are in the little details that get me there, not the actual outcome, but it's the process of how I get there, right? So I did certain things in terms of my practice and
Yeah,
training.
I think that would apply. This isn't necessarily training related, but that could apply if you're listening to somebody who's brand new to concealed carry, and they're, maybe they don't carry on a daily basis. Maybe they
Mhm.
carry occasionally, or they're saying, I don't carry with a loaded chamber, or I only carry when I go to bad neighborhoods, or whatever it might be. Right? Those are things that you can address and say, okay, I want to carry every day, or I want to carry, 5 days when I leave the house. I want to carry with a loaded chamber. And then saying, okay, I can measure those things, but how do I get to that point? Maybe, I look at my holster or my clothing. Maybe, I have to understand a little bit more, get more comfortable with the firearm, understanding how it functions internally. Maybe that will give me a little understanding of the safeties involved in carrying with a loaded chamber. Maybe I say, in order for me to carry with a loaded chamber, I want to take XYZ, a certain number of classes, so I feel more comfortable just in manipulating the gun and handling it. So I think, similar to like what you're saying, Riley, if somebody's brand new to concealed carry, and that's their goal, that's something that's measurable. It's you can measure it, you can put certain things in place, and you can actually see if you've achieved those things.
Mhm. And by the way, I really appreciate that you just shared a number of really excellent examples for folks in our space. In this concealed carry, we'll just say lifestyle. Many of you listening to the podcast, like Matthew, just mentioned some things that may apply to some of you listening right now, and that's awesome. That's excellent stuff. Like I mean, for a common thing I hear from a lot of newer concealed carriers, and I know Matthew hears this too, is I'm a little bit uncomfortable carrying my gun with a live round chambered.
Mhm.
I feel a little bit more comfortable carrying unchambered. It's just a little, I feel like for whatever reason that's a little bit reassuring, a little bit more safe for me, or that kind of thing. But I do want to get to where I'm comfortable carrying with a loaded chamber, right? Like, and that's where I hope that you would be if I'm describing you right now. I hope that that's what your mindset is that maybe you're a little bit uneasy about that idea, but you also recognize that it's important to consider getting to where you can carry with a live round chambered in your gun, because you start to recognize that. And maybe it's just from the conversations we have here on the podcast, the justified save stories we share. Maybe it's watching John Correa's active self-protection YouTube channel, seeing how quickly some of those violent attacks can happen. And so you go, oh man, like I don't know that I would have had the time or the skill to draw my gun, rack the slide, and then use that effectively against this violent attack. If that had been me in that person's shoes, right? So I need to get to where I'm comfortable with this idea, but I'm not quite ready yet. So how do I get there? Well, that's a great example of something that a person could set a 2023 goal for, or just a goal for, right? Like maybe you want to say like, hey, by April 1, that's just something I want to be comfortable doing. Well, what are some of the steps for being able to get there, right? Because that might be the goal, but you should outline some steps to get there. And some of those things might be like, well, I'm going to take 2 training classes with a And there's a local range near me that with a training cadre of instructors that seems pretty, dialed in. And I vetted them, and they seem like they'd be a good choice. And I'm going to take 2 classes. I'm going to take a class in January. I'm going to take a class in March, and maybe that'll, as I get a little bit more training under my belt, get a little bit more instruction under the supervision of a good instructor, more repetitions handling my firearm, learning manipulations and how to do that better. That that should lead me on a path to being a little bit more comfortable carrying my gun live chambered. Right. Or like you said, Matthew, maybe you want to get to know the intricacies and the design, of how your gun operates, and understand more of the from like a logic standpoint of this is how the gun operates, and this is why it's not unsafe to carry the gun chambered. So how can I get around that? And maybe you have the opportunity to take something like an armorer's course, or maybe it's just maybe a local range or instructor offers like a gun maintenance course or something like that kind of gets your feet a little bit wet in that. But an armorer's course would be awesome because you would break down the gun, whatever, and maybe it doesn't even matter if it's if it's an armorer's course on the specific type of gun that you actually use, but just spending some time seeing how a gun is put together and how it's built and how it operates gives you a little bit of confidence of how to, how to carry that, that it's going to be okay carrying that gun with a round in the chamber, kind of thing. So you could set some of those goals. I'm going to take this class. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to work with this instructor. I'm going to educate myself by watching, a trusted source of information on YouTube or something that covers some of these things. There's so many ways you could go about it, but I really appreciate that you shared some examples there, Matthew. I thought that were very, potentially applicable to some of you out there listening to the podcast right now.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, I know we've all been there, and it's so hard. I know sometimes we get focused on the performance part of it, but I always kind of, like I said, I'm kind of like a reflector. And so, when we started thinking about where we were, my mind went to like, where was I when I first started concealed, trying to carry a gun concealed and like that type of thing. And then I think about a lot of people who've come through classes and they want to carry, but they're just, they want to carry on a daily basis, but they're trying to overcome like that they have this, full size gun and, it's just not comfortable, or the holster isn't, they have a holster that's making it difficult for them to carry concealed. And so they shift away from doing that, but they want to, but they're just not sure the steps to go about achieving those goals. So, yeah.
Well, okay. So here's the thing, and this becomes, I think, a good segue, Matthew, into sharing a framework, if you will, for setting good goals, quality goals, that I think by the nature of if you actually follow this framework, I think you're more likely to set goals that that are specific enough that can be measured. That, and I'm actually giving it away here, but Matthew, we have here an acronym, and this is not anything we created. I don't even remember where this comes from for sure, but I've seen it referenced a number of places. But some, and Jacob likes to use this too, and that is the SMART acronym. Okay, so what is the SMART acronym as it relates to goal setting?
So SMART, like everything Jacob does, it's an acronym. Specific, measurable, achievable, they're relevant, and they're time bound.
So let's break that down. I think we've touched. I think specific. I've given enough examples of that, and we've talked about it already a bit. But obviously, the goal needs to be specific enough. It can't be like, I mean, for instance, here's a great publicly known goal, and it was audacious. I mean, in a big, big, big way. Back when John F. Kennedy said, by the end of this decade, we are going to put a man on the moon, right? And that meant because he said that what in 1963, 64,
Yeah, I
somewhere around
think
there.
so.
And it, like, so basically, like, in 6, 7 years, something like that, we're going to put a man on the moon, which at the time seemed unachievable, right?
Hmm.
And uh, and sure enough, I mean, that's what we did. In 1969, put the first man on the moon, and it took a lot of crazy things to make that happen, right? But like, that's a great example of. I mean, that's a big, 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 hairy goal, audacious goal. But and it's specific, but it probably also needed more specificity too. I mean, as far as like actually creating the steps to get there. But what I like about it is that he, in a very public way, said, by this specific time, which that's all that, that's one of the things too, the time bound part of the SMART acronym, right? This is the time frame. That in itself is its own level of specificity, right? By setting a time frame, like we're going to do this by such and such time. That is a part. It's kind of a bit of a redundant part, I think, of setting a specific goal. But we're going to put a man on the moon. Not just we're going to launch a rocket out there, not that we're going to put a satellite around the moon, not that we're going to put a probe on the moon, which we did all that, by the way, too, in testing some of the concepts. But we're going to do it by this time frame in a very public way. Jacob is tuning in. Holy smokes. The follow-up question to know if a goal is specific to know is, how will you know if you achieve the goal? Well, that's perfect, Jacob. How did you know? Because the next thing is measurable. So I'm going to ask you, Matthew, how, like, let's use a performance-based goal, right? For instance, what is your average draw speed to a
Around
first shot?
1.3, I would say I can achieve regularly
Yeah, and how do you know that?
because I've practiced it. I've done it live fire. I practice, with metrics, with dry fire, like LESR. So I have an idea of a range of where I operate in.
Yeah, you've used. I mean, you just mentioned some software. I know you've used a shot timer too,
Oh, sure, yeah.
right? So like you to know that you are at that particular place of performance, like you've had to have measured that goal. So Jacob asked the question, how, a goal is specific enough if you know how you will achieve the goal. And I think a huge part of that is knowing that it can be measured, that you could actually definitively say, like, okay, I did this, right? I measured it, and this is how, right? And that's super important. So, like, was there ever a time, Matthew, where you were like, I want to get to a certain, time with respect to my draw? Like, did you
Yeah,
have to work at it to get there?
Oh, yeah. So, my goal, and this is where I think, the realistic, or is it achievable? When I first started measuring my draw speed or draw to first shot, um, maybe it was around, I don't know, let's say it's around 2 seconds. If I were to just say, hey, by the end of the month, I want to get to a consistent 1 second draw. Well, I may be able to do that if I neglect every single other aspect of what's going on. But I think, like, this is, and that was one of my goals. Like, I want to get a sub-second draw. Well, I haven't achieved that. That's maybe like a down the road goal, but short term wise, I once I realized, okay, I'm not going to achieve that in the time period that I thought. So I said, okay, I want to get down to 1.5 seconds. So that was more achievable for me.
Hmm.
And I could put a time frame, maybe break down that long range goal into a shorter chunk that was more achievable and gave me, something to shoot for. So I didn't get discouraged or give up or say, this is impossible, or I'm just happy with this because it's never going to happen. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah.
this is something that I had to adjust a little bit when I started out.
Well, and see, that's okay too, to be like, oh, I want to be able to do this, but then along the way, you're like, well, that's not quite working out the way I envisioned. and reframing your goals, uh, because the context you find yourself in, your life has changed in some way, or you just realize that, well, the goal I set was a little bit more aggressive than maybe what I initially thought. And, then revamping that and revisiting it and saying, okay, now the goal is this. And by the way, a sub, 1.3 second draw is nothing to sneeze at. Like that's a very, very good, very acceptable level of performance. And I know that you can do faster than that because I've seen you do it, right? But I think you're telling me straight up, like, this is where I live, is like 1.25, 1.3, somewhere in that ballpark, and that's very good. If you can do that consistently and reliably, man, that is nothing to you know s- sneeze at. Like, that's a solid level of performance. Um, but to get there, you gotta put some work in, and you got to be able to measure it. And the
Mhm.
fact is you've measured that. You know what your performance level is. No different than me or any number of shooters, or some of my shooting friends that I know. Right? That, like, you can't. It's very difficult to make shooting performance based goals that have much meaning without having the ability to measure those shooting performances, if you will. And a lot of that involves, I mean, you got to have a target, some kind of,
Mhm.
what is my acceptable range of putting acceptable hits onto a target, whatever that is, and then the time frame I'm getting that done within, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I think that measurability, or measure, I don't know if that's a word, but being measurable is important, because I'll tell you, I didn't really start lowering my times. I wouldn't have known that I was lowering my times or increasing times or staying the same until I consistently used a shot timer.
mhm,
I think that the thing is somebody might go to a class, the instructor uses a shot timer, they give them their time, but they never get a timer of their own, so they don't have a metric, and they feel like they're doing good, and they're like, yeah, but they don't know. And I think knowing where you are along the way gives you gives you boundaries to say, like, well, I've been dry firing every day this week, and I dropped, like, zero point 0.2 seconds. And that's something that you wouldn't pick up if you just said, yeah, I think I'm doing good. I think I'm drawing fast, like, or, hey, I've gone a month without dry fire and my time went from 1.3 to now I went 1.7 or 1.8. And so you can see how much effort, when you put this much effort, this is what you're getting. When you slack off in these areas, this is what happens. So I think measurability, or being measurable, is really important to keeping
yeah,
goals, and doing that.
yeah. Well, okay. So that next part of the acronym, of the SMART acronym, which is achievable. So we've talked about specific, we've talked about measurable. Achievable is the next piece, and achievable becomes something that's a lot more definable itself when we have something that is measurable, right? And when we kind of have a context. So that's actually a big part of where I wanted to get to with our discussion today, as we're looking, all of us as shooters or concealed carriers or whatever context you find yourself within. Uh, as you're looking forward to 2023 and you want to start putting together a training plan of some sort, it's much easier to do that, and it's much easier to know what is achievable if you know where you are right now in whatever, so let's just use some simple examples. Because, and I know I speak to myself in a big way about, like, all the competitive shooting that I do, because that's my big passion right now, and has been for the last number of years, because I love it, I enjoy it, it's fun as heck, and it just helps me get better at shooting, and I just don't see any downside to getting better at shooting, as one that is also passionate about self-defense and personal defense. And so I speak to that a lot. And competition shooting is a big way that I work on myself in terms of my own shooting performance related skill. So a simple example here, right? So let's say, um, you know, like I would just say this much. I think, a lot of people talk about the sub-second draw, right? And people envy having a sub-second draw. Like, oh man, like I want to have a sub-second draw. And I would say, well, why? Why do you want to have a sub-second draw? You know what I mean? Like, and there's no harm in like there's I don't think really any harm in being faster. But certainly getting to a certain level might come at the cost. And you kind of mentioned, Matthew, well, I could get there and I could maintain that level of skill, but it would come at the cost of some other things. I'd have to put aside some other things in my life that maybe are important to me right now in these other contexts. And I'm already at, this level, which is good and is acceptable. Um, and I don't necessarily see that as being like you're settling for, less in any way. Just that we all have our own different lives and different priorities and different considerations and competing resources, especially where it comes to time. It might be money related resources as well too, but time's a real big one, right? To get good at certain things, it takes time, especially when skills involved, because time has to be put forth, effort has to be put forth to improve uh, technical skill. It just is a thing. And so now I'm at a place where I can maintain, I'm right at around a second. I basically kind of, I know how to move and I know how to push myself on demand to generate a sub-second draw, to first shot. But that's not necessarily. But I'm not always trying to do that. There's contexts where I'm looking more for consistency, and I'm pretty consistent with say a 0.95. But I'll tell you, I'm even more consistent with like a 1.1. And I could do that all day long. And I'm pretty happy to live in that space, to have the ability to sort of meter up or down my draw speed based on circumstance or situation as I see fit. But let's just say you're an individual that wants to improve their draw speed. And from a concealed carry perspective, I think that being able to have a really good draw is a worthwhile goal. Do you need to be sub-second? Well, I don't know. You need to figure that out for yourself. But I would say I would posit that having a sub 1.5 is doable for just about anybody with a modicum of work, consistent work, doing consistent dry fire, that is. And and that's, even self-defense shootings that we see, video and photographic evidence of, or some of the justified save stories we've covered and things like that, 1.5 second draw is probably, adequate for a lot of situations. So you need to decide though, whatever that metric is. But then the second piece is, can you achieve that? And part of, I think, determining the achievability of a goal is knowing where you already are, because then you can, that's kind of like JFK looking at, hey, 6-7 years down the road, we're gonna put a man on the moon. Where are we right now?
Yeah,
But the
he
reality
wasn't
is
making he wasn't making that promise with, if they didn't have spacecraft that could even go up into space at that point. You know what I mean? He wasn't
mhm,
taking that promise out there.
yeah. I mean, the fact is we already had made some progress towards, building rockets and putting men up into space. We still had a long, like actually a scary amount of progress that needed to happen to get a man on the moon. But hey, you know what? Somebody that was looking forward said, you know what? Based on where we are right now, I think we can do this. And I'm going to set the goal to push us to get there, which amazingly did. Which, I mean, it's just phenomenal. I mean, I don't know if there's anything that we've ever done since in the government at a governmental level where we've said we're going to do this thing and we actually got it done on time. Maybe not under budget. I think that they probably had some cost overruns and being able to achieve that in the 60s even, but we got it done in time, and that's pretty dang cool. So Anyway, achievable is super important, right? And again, I think a part of knowing whether you can achieve something is knowing where you are so that you can set something that's reasonable. And to know where you are now means you have to measure your performance now. And that's kind of what we were touching on a minute ago. Is like, Matthew, you kind of knew at one point about where you were performance wise. I've certainly been places where I kind of knew, well, this is where I was and this is where I wanted to get to. And then I crafted the plan to be able to do that. So, and then relevancy. Well, set relevant goals. I don't know. I don't want to spend a ton of time breaking that down. But the important part is that it should be relevant to what we're trying to achieve, where we want to get to as individuals, whether it's concealed carry related, shooting related, education related, whatever that is, financial, etc. And the final thing, again, with that SMART acronym, was that it should be time bound. That we should have a time frame that we're going to do something. So I'm just going to give you an example of a goal for 2023 for me is that, and realize that this is a bigger goal and that there's smaller components that make this up. And I'll describe some of those here in a moment. But for 2023, I want to go back to Carry Optics Nationals, and I want to do better than I did in 2022. So I just want to keep raising that bar. Okay. So my time frame there by default, because the event schedule was already set, it's like this June 20, it's like June 23rd, somewhere in that ballpark. It's the latter part of June. I'm going to be out in Ohio, in your neck of the woods, Matthew,
Yep.
going to the national championship. So I have to put in the work to get me to that place by that time. And I'm going to describe what some of that work is here in a bit. But that's just an example of, that's a goal of mine for 2023. I still have the goal. I want to make Grandmaster. But I'm at a place now where I realize as long as I keep doing what I'm doing and keep doing the work, that's going to happen when it happens. I'm going to continue trying to shoot classifiers at local matches and have those opportunities so I can continue to raise that score, if you will, so I can hopefully break through to that Grandmaster level. I will say that one thing that's been a bit of a disappointment to me is these last few months I've had the opportunity to shoot a couple of local USPSA matches, and 3 out of the last 4 I've shot didn't have classifiers, or they had to throw them out, which was a huge disappointment to me because I was literally going to those matches with the express purpose. Like, a huge point of that was, besides the other benefits of shooting a match, which is having fun and shooting a match and being able to, put to use my skills that I work on. But the big thing for me was shoot classifiers, because each time I shoot a classifier is another opportunity to get closer to a goal of mine of making Grandmaster. And some of those matches outside of my control didn't, for whatever reason, have classifiers when they normally would. There were some reasons for that, but that was disappointing because that kind of put a roadblock in my way of being able to get to where I wanted to get.
Yeah. I also think before, I know you want to detail it out and that's going to be awesome. I think as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, we can set multiple goals, right? And I think if setting goals does, at least in the bigger picture, I think it might also reveal to us where our desires are. Like, what are our passions? What are we willing to do to achieve this in light of the fact that we only have so much time, or we only have so much budget to spend on XYZ, And so I think if we look at this, we can also consider, how are we going to prioritize our time over a period of time? Like, I want to get this, I want to do this, achieve this metric in shooting. But in order to do that, it costs, I want to go to these classes, these training classes. I can look them up and say, it's going to cost me $600. I don't have $600 for this. So this is what I can do. So I think we can look at it and say, I'm willing to achieve these things in light of the other things I want to achieve as well. And so it helps us remain sort of balanced in what we So we don't neglect one part of our life for the sake of achieving a sub-second draw or whatnot. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. No, absolutely. Um, Now realize again, we're still going to come back to this. Like the whole point of having this conversation is to get you folks thinking about where you are right now, where you're trying to get to, and then how are you going to get there with whatever those goals may be. Uh, some of you maybe are just starting out as concealed carriers. Maybe you just barely got a permit. Maybe you're just getting into it. Maybe you just bought your first holster, whatever that might be. There's so many things that if you're just starting out, relatively speaking, like there's tons of things that you're going to need to learn, and you will eventually learn, and that you'll need to do. And a big part of, for me, at least, this has always been a perspective that I have had. And Matthew knows this about me. I'm a very performance-driven individual.
mhm.
But if I was going to carry a gun for personal defense, I only wanted to do it if I knew I could actually use it effectively, which is kind of what started me down this path of I want to get better as a shooter. I want to get better as a shooter. And I know that I realize that's not the only important skill, and you guys all should too. That is not the only important skill as it relates to self-defense minded, lifestyle. It's not the only important skill as it relates to self-defense or concealed carry, but I have zero desire to carry a gun on my person if I am not personally comfortable with my own level of being able to perform with that firearm. And so that kind of started me down this path. And now here, 5, 6, 7 years later, you know, I'm a pretty good shooter, you know, and I'm so driven. I intend to continue to get better. Now, someone else I know wants to get better. That's Connor. He's on YouTube watching today. He says, I'd like to get 20 hours of in-class training, putting me closer to a B/A class USPSA shooter. So Connor's like me. He wants to do better in USPSA, which is great. But the financial investment is slightly intimidating. Any suggestions on where my money, and I have to continue on to the next part of his comment here, would be best spent? So totally understand this, Connor, that spending money on training. So in other words, attending a class taught by a reputable instructor uh, it's a time investment, and it's also a big time financial investment. Whether you're going to some local instructor where you may be doing a 4-hour session for what was a typical rate, $125, probably somewhere in that ballpark for a 4-hour class. A lot of times a full day class is in the $200 to $250 range. Maybe it's a 2-day class, and those are often $400 to $500, right? Those are not small investments. Like chances are for many of you, the gun that you are carrying that you purchased was probably purchased for not much more than that. A case of ammo is probably about, that certainly was true like a year or year and a half ago, where if I was going to do a 2-day class, Matthew, that I was spending $500 to take, I was spending almost that much just
Yep.
in the ammunition that would be
Mhm.
fired in that class. So now you're like, well, it's a $400 or $500 class, but really it's like an $800+ class by the time you account for the class and the ammunition. These are not small investments, is my point. So my advice to you, Connor, uh, suggestions of where my money would be best spent. Well, I'm not going to, just because of the nature of the podcast, I'm not going to give you anything like super specific. And I also don't know exactly where you are. But what I do know is you don't want to waste any of your money, period. Right. And so if you have allocated a certain amount or budget for in-person, in-class training opportunities, and you have a certain goal, what you stated was, I want to get to an A or B class USPSA classification, uh, then probably what's best for you, Connor, is to train with a reputable instructor that has the ability to help shooters get to that level. So by that we're talking about probably instructors that are more a little bit focused on the performance side of things. And by that, well, it's pretty easy to look at some of the instructors out there who are also high-level USPSA competitors, right? And chances are those people are going to be able to help you get to where you're trying to get to because they've already been there and done that. Okay, and so you only want to train with somebody that you know is going to actually, that they have a reputation for being able to do that. I guess I could give some examples. Like Tim Herron would be a great example. This is literally what he does as an instructor, is help shooters up their level of performance in shooting. And a lot of his students are USPSA or IDPA or competitive shooter types. AJ Zito, another great example. I think Scott Jedlinski has some things to offer there, even though he's not necessarily like competition focused or anything like that, but definitely could help you. I think Matt Little would be a good example. I think if you had the opportunity to train with JJ Rakaza, Ben Stager, what are some other examples? Mark Smith, Nick Young, Billy Barton's another name that comes to mind. These are all folks that, and you may not even know all those names, and some of them maybe not be bringing classes to your area anytime soon. But those are all guys that I know that have a solid reputation, that understand performance shooting, and are known for being good instructors too. And so the point is if you have a certain amount and you don't want to waste your money, and you only have so much money, like you don't want to waste money, and that means you don't want to take any classes with any unknowns. So that'd be my advice. Matthew Maruster is a great instructor as well. Bravo, Chuck, on Facebook there.
Yeah. I have to disclose, he is a buddy of mine, and I told him to say that. So I appreciate that, Chuck. Check's in the mail.
That's awesome. So here's your, let me outline something. I've used some examples of like, and I use draw a lot of times because it's a very simple example. And it's also a very simple thing to work on, especially with dry fire involved. So if I was addressing the topic of your 2023 training plan from the context of, I want to get better at this specific skill. So if you've set the goal of, I want to be able to perform a consistent sub 1 second draw by the end of 2023, which I will tell you, for anybody listening, this is definitely doable, because I know it's possible. I've seen people that are brand new to guns within 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, go from a total noob to a very, very skilled shooter and manipulator of a firearm in that relatively short window of time, because they put in the time and put in the work. So something as simple and specific as, by the end of 2023, I want to be able to do a consistent sub-second draw, because I've decided for me that's important. And I like to use that as a metric because it's a relatively, there's just enough challenge there that it does take some work, but it is something that's achievable if you care enough to make it achievable. So here would be what I would suggest for your 2023 training plan. First of all, you're going to work on practice draws in dry practice every single day. Well, okay, we don't have to say every single day. Let's do this. 5 days a week. 5 days a week. You are going to work on draws in dry practice. 5 days a week. All throughout 2023. Okay? That's the first thing. Okay, so you're going to write that down. All right, here's my training plan. I want to get, my goal is sub 1.00 second draw on a target. Now, the standard metric in the industry is 7-yard target, either a USPSA A zone or IDPA down 0 zone. That's an 8-inch circle or a 6x11. Okay, your pick. I don't care. 7 yards, that's the standard. So we need to make that, we have to acknowledge that, right? Because I could say, I'm going to do a sub-second draw, but then if I put the target at arm's length, like that's a very different, thing. All right, so there's the standard. That's the goal. The first thing, though, to get there, as I'm crafting this and planning this out and writing this training plan, 5 days a week, draw in dry practice. Okay. Not only that, you're going to do that for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes of draw practice, 5 days out of the week, all throughout 2023. Can you handle 5 minutes of draw practice? I think you can. I think anybody, regardless of how busy you are, can find 5 minutes in your day if it's important enough to you. Okay, what are you going to do in that 5 minutes? All right. First of all, I'm going to have you do some baseline draws for the first minute. So take your 5 minutes. The first minute, just baseline. What that is just do nice, comfortable draws. We're just going to warm up for 1 minute. Draw. Okay. And each time we're drawing, we should be presenting to, I got like right here in front of me on the wall is one of our 1/3 scale USPSA targets. So you can print off at concealedcarry.com/print targets. Okay. Print that sucker off. I can stand 7 feet away from that because it's 1/3 scale, and that equates to the same relative size as a full USPSA target with an A zone at 7 yards if I was at like a live fire range. Free target, doesn't cost you a thing. Print it off, stick it on your wall, 7 feet away. That's easy enough to measure. Heck, here's a measuring tape. Measure off 7 feet from that target. First minute, baseline, just warm up. Just do what you currently can do, whatever that is. Draw, and I want you to see a clean sight picture by the time you complete that draw. Okay? Reholster. Draw again, clean sight picture, reholster. Do that for 1 minute. Okay? Minute number 2, so your second minute of the 5 minutes, because we're going to try to be very efficient with this. For the second minute, I'm going to have you just do the micro drill of getting your hands from whatever starting position. And it's good to practice and mix it up. Surrender start, hands in a defensive fence, hands down below, relax at your sides. Micro drill of just getting your hand on the gun. Okay? Do that for 1 minute. That's your second minute. So you're micro drilling, just the idea of from wherever your start position is to putting your hand on the gun. If that includes clearing concealment garments, which it probably does for most of you, that's part of it. Okay? So you're starting, remove shirt, hand on gun. I want you to be indexing your hand on the gun the way, with your master grip, the same grip you're going to use when you draw the gun out and actually use it. Okay. Your third minute, we're actually going to skip the part of where you are pulling the gun out of the holster. I'm going to have you start from the position where your support hand just meets the gun. So it's going to be kind of like in front of the center of your chest. Support hand just contacting the gun. And for 1 minute, from there to the target, from there to the target, from there to the target. Okay? That's your third minute. Your fourth minute, we're going to go back to all the way from the holster. And this is going to be the place where during this fourth minute, whatever your baseline time was. Now, how do you know what your baseline is? You got to have some kind of shot timer. I only have this one with me right now. Set a part time. Okay? And you need to be honest with yourself. You're going to hit the button of the timer, beep, draw, okay? And you need to figure out what that baseline is. So you're going to set a part time on the part of the shot timer. So you get a beep, beep, 2 beeps. Beep, first one's your start. Second one is you need to have that action completed by that point, okay? You should have been doing that in your first minute, that baseline draw session, okay? Shot timer phone app. Yep, absolutely. Deep South EDC on YouTube. Okay. So you should have been doing that during that first minute. Okay. Working at whatever that baseline time was or establishing it the first time you do this. During this fourth minute of practice, what are you doing? Whatever your baseline was, okay, whatever that baseline was, I want you to knock 1/10 of a second off. Okay. And if you will feel really spicy today, knock it down to 2/10 of a second. All right. So for your fourth minute, the whole time, you're now trying to beat what you were doing in your baseline by 1/10 of a second, maybe a fifth or 0.20. Okay. And then for that fifth minute of practice, I want you to push it to the next level, whatever that is. And finish at the very end with somewhere between 3 and 5 draws that are not necessarily on the timer, but just I want you just doing those repetitions as cleanly as you can. Because as you start pushing the speed envelope, you're going to get maybe a little bit messy. So then back it off or whatever, just at that, once you've worked at that 10th of a second or a fifth of a second beyond your baseline for 1 to 1.5 minutes, and those last few reps, I want you just to focus on doing the reps at a good clip, at an accelerated pace, but the focus is on doing it cleanly. Okay. If you'll do those 5 minutes, where the first minute's a baseline warm-up draws, second minute's micro drilling, getting your hand on the gun, establishing master grip. Third minute is working from where the support hand contacts the gun out to the target, where that now the focus is more on getting the support hand built onto the grip and then seeing a good sight picture. The fourth minute is pushing you beyond your baseline by 0.1 to 0.2 seconds. And then the last minute is a combination of another 30 to 40 seconds of pushing even beyond further your baseline, followed by 3 to 5 reps, maybe 10, whatever you feel comfortable with, of where the focus is on just doing clean but accelerated draw reps. 5 minutes a day, 5 times a week. There's your training plan for 2023. And here's what's cool. If you follow exactly what I just laid out, it will not take you till the end of 2023 to get it a sub-second draw. The cool thing is it's going to vary from person to person and also where you're already starting from. But some of you will get there in a month, maybe sooner. Some of you will get there in 2 months. Some of you will get there in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months. But if you diligently work at it like I just outlined, 5 minutes a day, 5 times a week for a year, you will get there before the year is up. Just using that one example. Okay. Now, what are these examples of? It's examples of, here I have a goal, and that goal maybe consists of a relatively complex skill or series of steps, and then I'm breaking it down into different components. The micro drills is a big part of that. Okay. And then I'm also dedicating part of my practice to actually pushing myself in some fashion. And to be able to push myself, I have to know where my baseline is so I can push beyond it. And by doing this in a deliberate, intentional way, you will make progress and you will get closer to what your goals are. And you can do what I've just described with, certainly with the shooting skills, with just about anything that you can contrive. Not just draw, first shot time or whatever. Okay. So I know I just spent a long time talking, but that's the 2023 training plan. And it can be simple, but it can be specific, it can be measurable, it can be achievable, it can be relevant, and it can be time bound. And if you just simply do that and do it consistently, and it doesn't even have to be something that you started on January 1 because of the new year. You could start that today, which I know we're, like 3 days away or whatever, but you can start that today or maybe in a month. I don't know. But what are you waiting for? Establish whatever your goals are, break them down into smaller bite-sized chunks or steps that are going to help you get there, and then get to work.
So what you're saying is basically there's going to be a test at the end of 2023 if you're a podcast listener or not, and the test is you have to have a sub-second draw. Because if you haven't, that means you weren't listening to Riley's training plan here.
Yeah, I mean, so I hope this made sense for some of y'all, and that it's helpful for you, and that you can see that. I mean, and here's what I've learned for myself in my own personal growth, and especially from a shooting perspective, but also in the last year, I've had some goals related to my physical health, to getting more in shape, to getting my body back to a place I'm happier. I mean, compared to where I was a year ago, I'm about 20 pounds lighter. Okay. So I made some headway. I did not make all the progress that I wanted to originally, but I did make progress. Awesome. Guess what? I have some more aggressive goals for 2023 in that regard. And here's what's cool. And this is my whole point. Regardless of whatever it is, if you will work at it consistently, regularly, frequently, you will get somewhere. And you'll get somewhere more specific the more specific you make that. But you will get somewhere if you just simply, tackle it one day at a time, one bit at a time, one step at a time. And so my final words on this, and I guess my pep talk to all of you listening is, hey, we're here at the end of the year. We're beginning another one. All of you should be wanting to get somewhere in your lives, whatever that is, and you need to decide what that is and get after it. Get to work.
Yeah.
And if you do it
Yeah.
consistently, you'll get there.
Yeah. Wherever
That's my pep
your
talk.
passions lie, you'll find a way to achieve it, I think, and so, yeah, I'll just be honest. My goal is, by the end of January 2023, that all the paperwork I fill out, I will not be putting 2022 on it. That's my goal. I think that's very achievable. Hold me to it.
Okay,
But
here's your January 2023 training plan, Matthew.
all
5
right,
minutes
16
each
checks a
day.
day.
Just write out today's date
Yeah, got a
100
chalkboard on my
times.
wall. Yeah. But yeah, I think, I hope this is beneficial to everybody, whether or not it's, whether you're trying to get a sub-second draw or carry every day, or just, focus more on family stuff or health stuff or whatever it might be. Just remember that smart deal. We got specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound.
Yep. Yep. And then craft all your practice, craft your training sessions, craft uh, uh, your drills and everything you do. I mean, if it's shooting specific, right? And by the way, I think that we can piggyback off of this episode in the future, relatively near future, and actually, because Matthew, you wanted to talk at some point about drills in a little bit greater detail, what they are, why we do them, et cetera, et cetera, and that drills are a part of, they are a tool in the toolbox of how we get better at technical skill. And I think we can, I've definitely got some thoughts on that, and thought maybe we'd get to some of that here today, but that didn't happen. So, um, in the future, I think that's something that's worth exploring some more. But already today, I give you a few little hints, especially as it relates to, we can take drills and we can break those drills down into smaller drills. And a lot of times we call those micro drills, and that's a tactic or technique or strategy that I have used for years now to get better at all the things that I do that are, technically skilled wise. I recently had the opportunity of, final words for me on this. I was actually preparing for many people may not know this about me. I don't know, but I'm actually a pretty skilled pianist. I play the piano pretty well. Not as well as I once did when I was about 17 years old. Was probably about my prime as a piano player. Practiced, every day. Was pretty diligent at it. I'm still pretty good at it because I practice at it enough that I maintain my skill okay. But recently, I was asked by a friend if I would accompany him on the piano while he sang the Christmas song "Oh Holy Night." And the arrangement he gave me is one I was not familiar with, which kind of caught me off guard because I've played like 3 or 4 different versions through the years, and I kind of thought it would be one of those. But he had this completely other arrangement, and I was like, "Oh, okay, buddy, didn't expect that." And he gave me about a week, to get it done. So what did I do? I looked at the music. Initially, I kind of tried to play through it just to kind of see how it went, and like, okay, this is going to take some work. I right off the bat, I identified 3 or 4 problem areas, and then I broke it down into smaller bite-sized chunks and worked on those little chunks, chunk by chunk by chunk by chunk, again and again and again. And even some of those chunks got broken into smaller chunks. Working at it, put it all together, and in a week's time was able to play this piece and accompany him, and he sang, and it was great, and it went off without a hitch. But it really doesn't matter, especially where technical skill is comes into play. Is typically what we do is what I just described, whether it was your draw to first shot time or learning how to play a piano piece. And I could get into more nuance than that, but But just interesting how that was on my mind recently about, this is not a non-shooting thing, but I still had to apply a lot of the same principles, as far as breaking it down and making it into smaller and smaller steps so I could get to where I wanted to get to.
Very cool.
Folks, I hope you have a wonderful and happy new year. And I hope that you have a very awesome and successful year of 2023. And we hope to spend at least part of that year with you through the form of this podcast. Hope to see you back here again, and hope that the information we conveyed in today's episode is helpful for you as you look forward to the coming year. May you be safe, blessed, happy, healthy, joyful, successful, all those things that we want for you, all of our listeners of the Concealed Carry Podcast. We wish you a happy new year. Final shout out to our sponsors, silencershop.com and mountainmanmedical.com. Appreciate your support of our sponsors that support us and make this possible. So Matthew, bid you adieu.
Thank you, sir. You too.
And we bid all of you, our listeners and viewers, adieu and happy new year. And until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.